She thought she had gotten away with it. Angela Reed, a woman who had built her life on ambition and appearances, believed her husband was gone for good. The poison had worked. At least, that's what she told herself. For 10 long years, she moved on, living the life she had always craved. Comfort, freedom, and control. But what Angela didn't expect was that the man she buried in her mind wasn't buried at all. Thomas Reed, her once devoted husband, had survived. He had spent a decade in a coma, broken in body but not in spirit. And when he finally awakened, he wasn't the same man she had tried to kill. He was colder, sharper, and consumed by one thought: revenge. This is the story of betrayal, obsession, and the terrifying price of lies. Thomas Reed wasn't always the man who would one day return like a ghost from the grave. He began life quietly in a modest Ohio neighborhood, the son of hard-working parents who valued honesty and discipline above everything. His father, a factory worker, would come home covered in grease but always with a lesson on perseverance. His mother, a schoolteacher, reminded him daily of the power of knowledge and respect. Together, they raised Thomas to believe in resilience, reputation, and the importance of earning your place in the world. As a boy, Thomas wasn't the loudest in class or the most athletic, but he carried himself with a calm confidence. Teachers admired his diligence, neighbors trusted him. Friends turned to him when trouble arose because Thomas had a way of listening without judgment. He was steady, reliable, the kind of young man who inspired quiet respect. By high school, his reputation was sealed. Thomas was the dependable one. He wasn't popular in the flashy sense, but people liked him. He studied hard, stayed out of trouble, and helped others when he could. That sense of fairness never left him. After graduation, Thomas pushed himself further. With no family wealth to fall back on, he put himself through college with part-time jobs and late nights spent studying. He earned a business degree, and, with it, a position at a respected marketing firm in downtown Ohio. His career flourished. Soon, he had a modest apartment, then a small home, and before long, he became a well-known figure in his community. But it wasn't just about career success. Thomas volunteered at local charities, mentored kids, and took on leadership roles in community projects. People admired him not because of wealth, but because of his sincerity. He showed up when others didn't. It was at one of those charity events where his life changed forever. That's where he met Angela. Angela was everything Thomas wasn't: 10 years younger, vibrant, ambitious, and utterly captivating. She had a presence that lit up a room. Their first meeting was brief, just small talk as they sorted boxes of donations, but Thomas felt something immediately. She was confident, teasing, and sharp. "Thomas, you've got an energy about you," she said with a playful smile. "Or maybe," he replied, "I'm just not used to someone like you being here." That spark grew quickly into something deeper. They talked, laughed, and found common ground. Angela was studying marketing at the time, and Thomas offered advice. What started as casual conversations turned into long hours of connection. For Thomas, she was unlike anyone he had met: beautiful, witty, and ambitious. She reminded him of himself, determined and unwilling to settle. Soon, they were dating. The relationship seemed perfect. She supported his career, admired his maturity, and appeared to love the stability he brought. For Thomas, who had always been steady and dependable, Angela was the piece that made him feel whole. Their courtship didn't take long to bloom into marriage. Thomas's proposal was simple, heartfelt, and sincere. Angela said yes, and they married in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Thomas believed they had built their foundation on love, but for Angela, love had always been about something else: security, status, and the life she had always wanted. The first months of their marriage were filled with laughter and passion. They cooked together, decorated their apartment, and dreamed about the future. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. Angela had her quirks, rearranging furniture endlessly, fussing over little details, but Thomas loved it. To him, it was a symbol of her energy and charm. Their weekends were spent walking through parks and talking about their dreams. She wanted to work in a top marketing firm. He encouraged her every step of the way. But beneath the surface, Angela's motives were different. Raised in a modest home, she had always dreamed of luxury: expensive clothes, elegant dinners, and the kind of freedom her parents never had. Thomas provided all of that, and she convinced herself she loved him for it. Yet, as the months passed, the very qualities she had once admired, his stability, his predictability, began to suffocate her. Thomas was steady, yes, but to Angela, steady soon became boring. She craved excitement, passion, and danger. And so the cracks began to show. At first, it was subtle. Angela became distant, distracted, glued to her phone. Conversations grew shorter, sharper. Nights out with friends became more frequent, while evenings at home with Thomas became strained and cold. One night, unable to shake the gnawing suspicion, Thomas picked up Angela's phone. He had never been the type to snoop, but something inside him pushed him to do it. What he found shattered him. Flirtatious texts with Mike, his boss. Messages full of longing and intimacy. Their affair had been going on for months. His heart pounded as he scrolled further, only to stumble upon something even worse. Messages from Richard, his best friend since childhood. The betrayal was complete. His wife, his boss, his best friend. Thomas dropped the phone, his hands trembling. The weight of humiliation and betrayal was suffocating. He had been blind, devoted to a woman who had already been planning her escape. But Angela wasn't done. Her cruelty was only beginning. Not long after, another blow struck. During a meeting at work, Thomas received an email. Immediate attention required. Company investigation. Back in his office, Mike, the same man sleeping with his wife, was waiting for him. The accusation? Financial discrepancies in one of Thomas's projects. The numbers didn't make sense. Thomas knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but his explanations sounded hollow. He was placed on indefinite leave. His career, built over years of discipline, was suddenly collapsing. When Thomas returned home, desperate for comfort, Angela was waiting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. He explained the situation, his fear, his uncertainty. Her response was ice cold. Well, maybe if you focused on what really matters instead of working all the time, this wouldn't have happened. It was a knife to the chest. Instead of comfort, she offered blame. The following weeks broke him further. Angela mocked him in front of friends, turning his failures into entertainment. She dismissed his attempts to rebuild, criticized his ideas, and treated him less like a partner and more like a burden. At a dinner party, she humiliated him openly. "So, Thomas, how's the job hunt going? It's been months, hasn't it? Good thing we've got this house, or who knows where we'd be." The laughter around the table was hollow, uneasy. Thomas sat in silence, shame burning through him. The man he once was, the strong, successful Thomas Reed, was gone. Angela no longer hid her infidelities. With Richard, her flirtations became obvious. She laughed too hard at his jokes, touched his arm too lightly, gazed into his eyes a second too long. It was as if she wanted Thomas to see, wanted him to suffer. One evening, Thomas watched from across the room as Angela and Richard slipped into their own private bubble, laughing together. His chest tightened, his throat closed. He knew what was happening, but he couldn't bring himself to confront it. Not yet. The humiliation festered, poisoning him from the inside. Angela wasn't just betraying him, she was daring him to stop her. And still, he said nothing. By 2011, with his career in ruins and his marriage a hollow shell, Thomas tried to rebuild. Using his savings and a loan from an old friend, he opened a small pizza shop in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. He worked tirelessly, rolling dough in the mornings, manning the register by day, and scrubbing the kitchen at night. Slowly, customers trickled in. The shop began to grow. For the first time in months, Thomas felt a flicker of pride again. But Angela's response was dismissive. "A pizza shop? That's what you're wasting your time on?" No encouragement, no support, only contempt. While Thomas bled himself dry rebuilding his life, Angela spent her days shopping, dining, and living the luxury she craved. She had stopped being his partner long ago. And yet, Thomas clung to the fragments of his old life, unaware that Angela's betrayal was about to drive him past a point of no return. This was only the beginning. The poison Angela had once given Thomas was more than physical, it was emotional, psychological, and devastating. But Thomas Reed wasn't finished. He would rise from the ashes of his old life. And when he did, he wouldn't be the man Angela remembered. He would be something far colder. Angela's neglect had once felt like a cold wind drifting through the hollow spaces of their marriage. But what cut deeper than her absence was the suspicion that began to burn quietly inside her. She no longer looked at Thomas as a man rebuilding. She saw him as a threat. Every small victory he achieved in his modest pizza shop became, in her mind, evidence of something more. She couldn't stand the thought of him rising again, even from the ruins of his life. In Angela's twisted logic, his resilience wasn't strength. It was deception. She told herself the shop was just a front, a mask for hidden wealth he was secretly hoarding. Every decision he made, every late night at the oven, became fuel for her paranoia. She started watching him like a hawk, waiting for him to slip up, to reveal the hidden fortune she was convinced existed. For Thomas, there was no conspiracy, no secret fortune, just exhaustion, sweat, and the stubborn hope of rebuilding one small piece of his life. But Angela's eyes had turned sharp, her words cutting, and he withdrew further. He no longer had the energy to argue. His shop was all he had, and he clung to it with quiet desperation. But Angela wasn't interested in rebuilding. She was interested in taking his assets, his life insurance policy. His existence had become an obstacle between her and the life she believed she deserved. And so, behind her cold silence, she began to plan. The 14th of August, 2011, began like any other day. For Thomas, it was long hours at the shop, his clothes dusted with flour, his body aching but proud of the small progress he had carved out of nothing. He came home tired but oddly peaceful, not knowing his wife had already chosen this night to end his life. Angela had prepared his favorite Italian meal, the kind of dinner that might have, in another world, reminded him of their better years. To Thomas, it felt like a flicker of hope. Maybe she was softening. Maybe they could still rebuild together. But as she set the plates, her hands were steady with purpose. Angela had slipped a slow-acting poison into his food. It dissolved without taste or trace, hidden beneath the warm richness of the dish. She smiled at him as he took his first bite, her eyes never truly meeting his. At first, it was subtle, a heaviness in his chest, a dizzying wave that he dismissed as fatigue. Then the room spun, his vision blurred. He pushed his plate aside, unable to swallow another bite. His breath grew shallow. Angela watched. She didn't panic. Instead, she reached for the phone and dialed 911 with a voice rehearsed in false concern. To the dispatcher, she sounded like a frightened wife. But inside, she was calm, almost relieved. The ambulance rushed Thomas to the hospital. His body was limp, his chest rising and falling faintly. Doctors fought to stabilize him, their faces set in grim concentration. Angela followed, her composure unnervingly perfect, as though she had already prepared for the role of the grieving wife. But her plans didn't unfold as smoothly as she imagined. Within an hour, Thomas's family arrived, his sister Carla, his parents close behind. Their shock, their fear, their refusal to give up on him stood in the way of Angela's quiet insistence that he wouldn't want to live like this. Carla's eyes narrowed as Angela spoke. Something in her tone, in her eagerness to end things, felt wrong. The doctors, cautious and uncertain, refused to make any rash decision. For now, Thomas remained in a coma, the machines keeping him alive, the family clinging to hope. Angela, however, had already made peace with her choice. To her, he was as good as dead. For Thomas, the coma wasn't an empty void. His body lay paralyzed, but his mind was awake, sharp, trapped, and tormented. He replayed every memory, every betrayal, every moment that had led him to this prison of silence. Angela's face haunted him, her indifference at his bedside, her whispered suggestions to pull the plug, her coldness in the face of his suffering. Worse still, the affairs. First with Mike, his boss. Then with Richard, his best friend. The people he trusted most had carved him open and left him to rot. 10 years. A decade of silent rage, of helplessly watching life pass without him. His body wasted away, but his hatred only grew stronger. By September 2021, when his eyes finally fluttered open, he wasn't just waking from a coma, he was waking into a mission. The fluorescent lights burned his vision. The world was blurry, unreal. His throat was dry, his muscles frail, his voice gone, but his mind was razor sharp. Carla was the first to see his eyes open. Her joy broke into sobs as she clutched his hand. Their parents rushed forward, tears streaming down their faces. To them, it was a miracle. But for Thomas, the miracle was not life itself. It was the chance to finally make Angela pay. The months that followed were brutal. Every step, every movement was agony, his muscles screaming from years of disuse. But Thomas endured it all in silence, hiding the storm inside him. His family celebrated his progress, believing he was simply grateful to be alive. They didn't see the fire burning behind his calm exterior. They didn't know that every stretch, every exercise, every agonizing step forward was not just for recovery, it was preparation. He wasn't rebuilding his life, he was building his revenge. The 16th of January, 2022, the night Angela's life ended. He had planned it carefully, watching her routines, tracing her steps, waiting for the perfect moment. She lived in a quiet, upscale neighborhood now, far from the ruins she had left behind. That night, Thomas entered her home silently, a key obtained months earlier fitting the lock with ease. Angela was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She turned, startled, when she saw him. For a fleeting moment, recognition and fear froze her in place. He raised the gun. The shot echoed through the house, sharp and final. Angela collapsed, her blood spreading across the pristine tiles. Thomas didn't smile, didn't feel triumph, just cold finality. Angela was gone. 5 days later, the 21st of January, Mike was next. Thomas found him at his usual bar, sitting alone with a glass of whiskey. Without a word, Thomas slid into the seat across from him. Mike barely had time to register his presence before Thomas raised the gun and pulled the trigger. The shot was muffled by the hum of the crowd. Mike slumped forward, lifeless, the glass shattering on the floor. No one noticed until Thomas was gone. The 31st of January, 2022. Richard. The betrayal of a friend cut deeper than Angela's poison or Mike's affair. Richard had been his confidant, his brother. To discover he had slept with Angela, had silently aided in Thomas's downfall, was unforgivable. Thomas tracked him to a restaurant. Calmly, he approached, sat across from him, and pulled the trigger. No words, no explanation, just the end. Richard's body crumpled in the chair. The restaurant fell silent, and Thomas walked away into the night. The 1st of February, 2022. Thomas walked into the police station. No disguise, no attempt to run. His mission was complete. "I killed 3 people," he said flatly to the officer at the desk. His voice carried no tremor, no hesitation, just truth. The officers stared at him in shock, struggling to comprehend the calm finality of his words. He didn't fight when they cuffed him. Didn't argue. Didn't cry. For 10 years, revenge had been his purpose, and now that it was over, all that remained was emptiness. News spread quickly. The story of Thomas Reed divided public opinion. Some called him a tragic hero, a man driven to vengeance by betrayal and cruelty. Others condemned him as a murderer who had allowed hatred to consume what little life he had left. But the question lingered: was his revenge justice, or had he simply become the very monster he sought to destroy? For Thomas, there was no answer, only silence.